Good morning. Can I please ask you to take your seats? A warm welcome to you all, Your Excellencies, ministers, ambassadors, dear representatives from ministries, NGOs, the private sector, academia, and the media, more than 300 participants, and I hope you all made it safe and sound to The Hague, and otherwise will still make it despite the heavy snowfall over the last few days. The climate security nexus has acquired a specific meaning in the Dutch context. Extreme weather conditions of much larger and devastating scale than this, like the floods across South Asia and the hurricanes in the Caribbean, have further contributed to awareness among the wider public of climate risks. Climate catastrophes like the Lake Chad crisis show how climate risks function as a threat multiplier. The consequences of a warming world worsen existing risks and make it harder to work on solutions. Against this background, I'm grateful that you have decided to join us on this new edition of the Planetary Security Conference. The Planetary Security Initiative is more than a conference. It is an initiative that aims to strengthen and deepen knowledge on the relationship between environmental stresses and security, not only to think about it, but to arrive at policy solutions and catalyze action on the ground. This year we underlined this by presenting the Planetary Security Declaration, the Hague Declaration, and this declaration is now open for endorsement by you and all others who could not join us but are concerned about climate-related security risks. The declaration calls for action in the main areas of this year's conference. We focus on 3 regions that require urgent action as well as long-term prevention and sustainable development efforts. First, the Lake Chad region that is currently suffering one of the world's largest humanitarian crises, with people around Lake Chad struggling with extreme food insecurity and widespread violence. Second, the Mali region that faces multiple interconnected governance, security, and environmental challenges. And Iraq, beyond Mosul, and the grueling war faces the urgent challenge of stabilization and reconstruction, but sustainable and equitable management of water resources underlies many challenges of post-IS Iraq. Against the background of these crises, we aim to contribute to a stronger recognition of how climate-related security risks affect migration. Climate-related security risks must feature in strategies and funding programs that address the root causes of mass migration. Sustainable migration management cannot do without addressing these climate-related security risks. The relationship between climate change and conflict is more and more urgently felt in cities. The trend towards rapid urbanization needs to be complemented by an acknowledgement of how climate change and urban instability and violence interact in urban planning processes. Lastly, we think that a more proactive approach in coordinating climate-related security risks is needed at a global level. For that purpose, we think that creating an institutional home, a coordinating mechanism, could support the UN system in coordinating its work on climate-related security risks, including with joint risk assessments and risk management assistance. If you agree with these calls, please sign this Planetary Security Declaration. I want to thank the organizations that make the Planetary Security Initiative and Conference possible. The Klingendahl Institute leads a consortium of think tanks implementing the Planetary Security Initiative on behalf of the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we are very grateful for their support and very glad to announce that we will continue our cooperation for the year to come. Our consortium partners are Adelphi, the Center for Climate and Security, CIPRI, and the Hague Center for Strategic Studies. Many more organizations contributed to coordinating the 15 workshops and six special sessions. Other organizations supported in other ways our endeavors, like the municipality of The Hague, the European Climate Foundation, the SCOL, Global Threat Fund, and our media partner, Free Press Unlimited. They made it possible that journalists from all over the world joined us today. All of these parties have by far exceeded what was expected from them and demonstrated true passion and commitment to furthering the planetary security agenda and this initiative. You all belong to the community of practice on planetary security. We cherish to have you gathered here and involve you, learn from you, and inspire you to take follow-up action as much as you can. As you are here, please contribute actively in the workshops which are set up as interactively as possible. Please network and please tweet #PSC2017. We welcome your feedback. In the PSI app, a system is in place to rate sessions, and we will send an evaluation shortly after this conference. Let me conclude with a very big thank you to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in particular, Michel van Winden, where are you? Yeah. And Carola van Wijnshoever, yes, for providing not only generous support, but working in a truly cooperative spirit with us on this project. Also, a big thank you to the team that worked on this at Adelphi, Congress by Design en Klingendaal, Janani, Vivekananda, Tammo Bakker, Anne Bakker, Caroline Sarzana, Maureen de Grauw, Marijke Schipper, Harriet Garfelink, Ria Voorhaar, and Louise van Schaik. I would like to ask you for a big round of applause for these people, and then ask Louise van Schaik from the Klingendaal Institute to take the floor to engage in a first very interactive item on the program. Thank you very much.
Yes, a warm welcome to all of you. We have encouraged all the leaders of workshops and special sessions to have interactive sessions in which you can involve the audience. But with an audience of so many, this is not always easy. So we thought we will work today with a online system, which is called Mentimeter. And I hope that all of you who have a smartphone would be willing to go to menti.com or go through menti.com in your app, PSI app, and fill in the code 448012 so that we can just ask you some questions to see, let's say, how you view this point of view. Just so, please. And what you can also do is already say if you like this kind of approach with a thumbs down or up, or if you think, what is this about? So just, I already see the first people into the system with the thumbs up, fortunately. And even some love indications. Well, that's even better. So it might look a bit like snowfall, but it isn't. Yeah. So, and this is again also to show you, let's say, who are the institutes who we worked with so closely. But again, as Monica emphasized, we worked with many, many more. And I'm glad to see so many familiar faces and so many people we emailed with so much in the previous months, I should say. Okay. Okay, I think lots of people have now logged in, so we can go to the next slide, which is a question. And the question is, we need more evidence on the link between climate and conflict. You can say, no, we need action now. We need action now to reduce conflict risk, all this theoretical hassle. Yes, evidence-based policy is needed to secure citizen support for action. We need more action, we need more evidence, but can't wait for it. Or, I don't know. For those of you who are wondering what is this beautiful building in the back, this is actually our house. Well, unfortunately, it's not my house, but it's the house of the Klingendaal Institute, and it's called House Klingendaal. It's situated in a nice park, Klingendaal. So if ever you would come to visit, please think about us and take a stroll in the park and visit us at the Klingendaal Institute. Okay. Okay. So we can see most people think we need more evidence, but we can't wait for it. We need also to engage in action on the ground now. So I think this is a very good notion to have when at the start of this conference. Okay, let's go on. Let's move on to the next question. Climate change is causing migration and undermining security. No doubt about this. Politics and governance issues are more important. It's contributing to it, and it's our responsibility to prevent and to prepare for this now. Or I see this differently. Okay. So I think, in short, we can say most people believe it is contributing to it, and it is our responsibility to prepare and prevent for this now. And I think, again, in many of the sessions of this conference, we will see how we could possibly do this. Still more people contributing, 124. Okay, thank you so much. The results will be shared, I think, with you at the end, so you can still see them. Okay, next slide, please. I will try the escape room on climate and migration. Yeah, no way. Or escape room? What is this? Okay, so I already hear some whispering with people explaining to other people what is an escape room. So let me just briefly elaborate. Tomorrow, we have a room, and you can choose to go in there with 5 other people. It's a locked up room, and you need to make puzzles which are related to climate change and migration to get out there. It takes approximately 20 minutes. And it is great fun. It has already been tested at the Amsterdam International Water Week. Many people took part in it. And it will allow you to really experience climate and migration in reality. Well, only for 20 minutes. Of course, it's nothing compared to what actual migrants have to go through. But yeah. So tomorrow the escape room will be opened. And I hope that you like puzzles and challenges to find the key. Okay. Next slide, please. Have you already met one of the 10 volunteers? So just to underline, when we put up a call for volunteers, about 50 people responded, sending in their CVs, who wanted to come over to help. And this is something we experienced this year, and we also experienced it last year. We noticed that so many young people, students, are interested in this topic. So the people who work as a volunteer, they have the orange shirt, and they can help you to find your way to sessions, to download the app if you haven't done so already, to know how to sign the declaration. Well, it's easy, I will explain to you in a minute. So they will really explain to you how it all works, where you can go, and also in case of emergency. And this is, of course, also the case for the conference secretariat, which you've probably already seen outside. Well, I think most of you have the badges, so you know where to find them. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. Did you already endorse the Hague Declaration, which is now on the homepage of the Planetary Security Initiative? Yes, no, have to ask my hierarchy. This is something we experienced a lot in the past weeks. We have already reached out, and we are very pleased to let you know that we have already, I think, 45 endorsements this morning when we got live with it with the press conference. We have several countries supporting it now, the Netherlands, Belgium, Sweden, Iraq, and many more to follow. And we have several heads of important institutes signed up to it. So yeah, please give me the next slide. And this brings me to, yes, please go to, today, planetarysecurityyinitiative.org and endorse the declaration. Well, I see very many thumbs up and love signs, so I think this will be very much appreciated. And we really hope with this declaration that we can make a difference and can really catalyze action on the ground. And we also hope that we will meet you again next year and look back what happened and really hold influential stakeholders, ask them what they actually did on the ground. Okay. Thank you so much. I will leave it here. I will now give the floor to Dan Smith, the director of SIPRI, Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. Dan is a person who has worked on the climate security interface for decades, I think, maybe 2. The team is recent, but he is really one of the biggest authorities in this field with great experience, and we're super pleased that SIPRI is part of the consortium, and also super pleased that you are here, Dan, today, and will moderate the opening plenary. The floor is yours. Thank you, Dan.
Well, thank you very much, Louise. After an introduction like that, all I can do is to ask the panelists to join me and to find a seat. I'm going to have this seat, and as long as you don't take my seat, that's fine. So our panelists, as it says in the program, are, and I'm going to say it in the order in which you actually arrive at the platform. So the first to come is Hans Momas, who's Director General of the Netherlands Environmental Agency. Hassan Janabi, who is Minister of Water Resources in Iraq. Take a seat, sir. Sherry Goodman, who has too many allegiances for me to be able to recite them all, but of course was Deputy Assistant Secretary at the Pentagon during the Obama administration. And Christian Rebbergen, who is Director General of International Cooperation at the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And what we're going to do is to open up a conversation. I'm going to take a couple of laps around the panel, so to speak, with some questions which they've had some hints about, but nothing is scripted. And then I'm hoping that we will be able to invite questions from you all as well. And in the spirit of the interactivity, which is very much the theme of how this conference should be done, we will crack on. The theme, of course, is from analysis to action. I was interested, but I didn't really quite know myself what reaction to try when the question came up. Do we need more evidence-based research? Well, you know, I'm director of an evidence-based research institute. Of course dumb question. Can we wait for action? No, we actually know an awful lot, even if there's some things that we don't know. Do the public need to have more evidence-based research? Yes, probably, as long as it's really well presented. So I tried to press yes on all 3 of those, and there's something wrong with the app, because it only let me choose one of them, which was irritating. But let's dive into this. And I wanted to start, Minister Janabi, Hassan, with you. One of the main vectors, one of the main transmission mechanisms of the relationship between climate impacts and security is clearly water. So talk to us a little bit about that and the experience in Iraq with the relationship between water issues and the insecurity that has plagued Iraq now for so long.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is a tough question. Iraq is an ancient country, and the first human civilization started in Mesopotamia just because of water. But at the same time, Iraq is a downstream. We discovered lately that Iraq is a downstream country. I said we discovered because we started to suffer from this geographical fact that we are downstream. And because we started much earlier in controlling our water system, we design and implement our infrastructure based on that. Starting in the 80s, our neighboring countries embarked on water resources development, and they started also building major dams and control structures. So we discovered that we are downstream and we need to negotiate, we need to have a long-term agreement on this, and this did not happen, you know, in the Middle East setting. Now, geopolitics in the Middle East is a major factor, but to add to this, the climate change impact. We did not feel that before, in fact. And the climate change impact is cumulative. I mean, we started experiencing this decline in available water to our country.
Decline in the volume of water.
Volume of water. So it's a combination of human interaction with the system, with the climate change impact in terms of the snowfall, amount of snowfall, the patterns, also the shifting in the seasons. So even springs and winter seasons starting in Iraq like a month or even 2 months later. So this impact is very visible. But the other aspect of that we in Iraq, especially in the last 30, 40 years, we also faced very destructive enemies, if you wish, and we have threat that really threatened the very existence of our country. Of course, we ended up with Daesh and terrorism. So the priority in fighting Daesh for the people is not like at the same level like facing the consequences of climate change. So the priority also here in the context of Iraq is a little different. Now, after they defeating Daesh, people started to realize that we need to go back and build our country again and make it prosperous again and things like that. So people started to really feel the harshness of the lack of water. Now, as a Minister of Water Resources, I am facing right now one of the toughest periods of time because agriculture in Iraq is seasonal. We have summer season and winter season. We are now in the middle of winter season, and we have 4 million dunams. That is, the 1 dunam is equivalent to 2,500 square meter that people were anticipated to be cropped and cultivated, but we don't have enough water to cultivate that. So people are very upset, and so this is we have somehow a social conflict now, particularly in the south. People started to feel the prioritization of water use is very important. Drinking water, agricultural water, water for the marshlands and environment and things like that. So we are in this dilemma, if you wish, to transfer the culture of the plentiful water available for Iraqis into a culture of dealing with declining water resources in Iraq. So this change socially is a very painful.
So what I want to do, if I can do, is bring those thoughts into relationship to the sometimes quite angry debate certainly in the scholarly communities, to some degree amongst politicians as well, which is in a sense about how you assign weight to the different factors. So, for example, in discussing conflicts in the Middle East at the moment, there's a discussion, as I say, sometimes quite angry, about, well, if you put all the emphasis onto climate change, drought, declining water supplies, then you're somehow giving an alibi for bad governance. That actually, and it's very often said, the problem is not water, the problem is governance. So how do you, in politics and maybe in management of this problem, how do you distinguish the different weight of the issues? I mean, there's declining water, you said, There's growing population, there's the war in the neighboring country as well, there's relations with your neighbors, and there's climate change. Are you able to kind of distinguish out the different factors that feed into this, or are you just dealing with a problem?
Yeah, we are talking about it, but it's not everybody is on board on this. I mean, our understanding the ministry, we understand the impact of this. We also have a strategy until 2035 is to make that transition happen so that we can adapt and accommodate the impact on our country. At the same time, we preserve the productivity, we preserve the social fabric of our society, we stop internal displacement or migration from rural areas into this major cities that becoming really as much as rural areas as well because of lack of services and infrastructure, because of war destruction. But this is, as I said, this happens in a country who used to be very highly centralized and controlled by one man for like 35, 40 years. And that destroyed our country and make the entire society completely dependent on the government to, you know, handout of whatever. We call it in Arabic makrama. I don't know how to translate. I know some Arabic people. So the government is basically donating to the people instead of empowering the society so that the government can serve the society. What happened for the last 40 years or so, pre-2003, is the society serving a government. So the society became very weak and dependent completely on government handout. This is one thing. Of course, also the economy was one-sided. It was oil-based economy. It's completely dependent on oil prices, on that income. So now with the declining oil prices, we discovered that diversification of our economy is the way to go. But to make that happen during a time of war and destruction, during a time of transition from highly centralized dictatorship to a decentralized governance, is not an easy go. So we have internal governance issues, even I'm talking about the water sector now, that we can handle with difficulties. But the most important thing is the regional governance of shared water, because 70% of our water comes from outside the country. And we don't have long-term agreements with Turkey and with Iran. Syria now in trouble, but we have less problems with Syria. In fact, we have good relation when it comes to water. We have a principal agreement based on percentage of whatever comes to Syria from Turkey. That's 58% of that water comes to Iraq, 42% to Syria. And this is a very good principle. It's been successful in implementation. The Syrians kept their words in this. And I would like to transfer this agreement, which is very simple, into our relation with Turkey and Iran. And I have not been successful yet, but I am very hopeful.
Right. So, I mean, so the climate change is factored in alongside the other challenges which you're facing. Sherry, I wanted to move on to you, if I may do now, and ask, starting with your experience when you were in government, how do these issues play out in your experience and in your perspective? Water and climate change alongside the other security challenges which a very different kind of country faces.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Dan. And let me first say thank you also to the organizers. I mean, 3 years ago, Alexander VBAC came into my office and said, I want to start this conference. I'm here in the US. I'm going to start this conference. And I said, great. And then now look what you've grown in, and congratulations to Klingendahl and to the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs for taking this on. And we're privileged to be part of it. I mean, 10 years ago, I'm here with the Center for Climate and Security in the United States, which is an umbrella organization sort of galvanizing the community in the US. And 10 years ago, we founded the CNA Military Advisory Board. CNA is represented here as well. We coined the phrase threat multiplier when we organized a group of military leaders, US military leaders, to address the national security implications of climate change. But going back 25 years now, almost, I was in the Department of Defense as the first Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Environmental Security. And we began a journey that has now brought us to where we are today, in many ways, to understand environmental considerations in security. And at that time, most people said, what do environment and security have to do with one another? Back in the 1990s, there was little understanding that it had more to do with maybe cleaning up the mess where you made it if you were running a military base or running a ship that might be dumping its waste overboard. But we decided very deliberately, and with many of you who are here representing your organizations today, that there's a strategic component to this, and we need to understand how environment and natural resources affect our security across the full range of the broader security context, defense, development, and diplomacy. And now we see, for the last decade, in the United States at least, there has been a deliberate effort to integrate climate change, energy, now water security, natural resources, on a broader sense, into national security and environmental security considerations. And I think what this means is that there's a willingness now to understand how these trends, water scarcity, changing climate factors, energy resources, are affecting our broader national security and geopolitical situation. I think there's still much more to do. I think that the awareness and the understanding I've just heard from the minister here is a story that I think is not yet as widely understood across the range of U.S. foreign policy and national security decision makers as I would like to see happen. But I think that there has become much more work has occurred over the last decade to understand the full range of how environmental and natural resource factors are affecting our broader geopolitical context, what our security posture should be in various regions of the world, and also to understand how the changing global dynamic is affected not only by deliberate acts, but also by the changing natural resource and sort of global dynamic of which we are all a part. So
I just want to zero in on one aspect of this, which is as controversial in the US as it is in Europe, which is the migration question. And it's very often, I mean, you know, people talk with very straightforward cause and effect line of argument. Climate change causes or is going to cause migration on a huge scale. Similar arguments, climate change causes or is going to cause armed conflict. But let's stick with the migration issue. To what extent do you feel that the discussion as you hear it and as you experience it around the relationship between climate change and migration is really gripping the realities? And I mean, what nuances does it need, or are you content with where it sits now?
Well, I think in the analytic and think tank community, there has been a great deal of important work done to integrate the understanding of how climate change, water scarcity, and other factors are influencing migration globally, whether it's from the Middle East and Africa into Europe, or whether it's from Central America, Latin America into the United States, and many more different migration flows and internal displacements as well, which I think are equally important. I think there's a lot more opportunity to advance understanding, take that analysis and use it to inform smart policy decisions on migration, and to use it also to inform preventive approaches. Not necessarily to stop migration. I mean, migration throughout history has been an important source of change and growth. But we've seen it become, I mean, there's clearly an ugly dynamic to it, in part, in the U.S. political dialogue right now that hopefully is not long-lasting, but we have to recognize that that underlying seed is there. And at the same time, I think we can use it more to inform smart decisions. And this is sort of the community of practice that I think will help us better integrate across that kind of decision-making community. I think there's a lot of smart decision-making occurring in sort of the urban context. I know that's another theme here, but I think there you see cities, you know, across the globe, but also in the U.S. are really leading in the efforts, and that includes in how to deal with changes in migratory patterns and influx of new people.
Hans, if I can come to you now, you're the head of the Environmental Assessment Agency, and one of the issues that was being asked about in these slides is really the relationship between evidence and action. You know, which could also be seen as being the relationship between standards of proof and standards of probability for risk. On what basis do you work? I mean, how do you prioritize which are the areas to which, on which you have to focus? The Netherlands has got a huge amount of experience, I mean, going back centuries in living with and in a very challenging environment. So how do you do it?
Well, you know, as planning bureau, as we call it in Dutch, which we always find a bit of a problematic term because we don't plan anything. But as planning bureau, you're positioned at the interface of, you know, knowledge, science, and political action. So that puts you aside from the universities, who have a primary responsibility on organizing knowledge in a sort of scientific environment. So we are very much about bridging the universities with policy making. So for us, linking analysis to action is almost self-evident. But I don't think the discussion is in general terms about that. I think that would be a wrong discussion to have it. I think we're moving from an old way of connecting analysis to action to new ways of connecting analysis and action. I think we have to understand that movement. So we come from a background in which planning was really a top-down exercise based on blueprints. And we can see the good thing of that in the Netherlands because, you know, we have our magnificent dikes and, you know, 40% of the people are living below sea levels, but with no wet feeds, etc., etc. And that's based on, you know, that's based on all solid scientific work and all solid planning, top-down and big infrastructures and all that. But I think we're going to move to something else, to a new type of knowledge action model, which is much more interactive, which is much more adaptive, which is much more about linking systemic knowledge to also local knowledge. So for instance, in the Netherlands today, you know, this phrase of adaptive policy making is really almost a hype. So we know that, you know, we have to have long-term perspectives. So we have the Paris Agreement, and we have this notion of 1895 reduction of emissions, etc. So long-term goals. But then we don't know really how to get there, because there are so many choices to make. About gas, about coal, about wind, about solar, about, you know, geothermology, etc., etc. So that's in a certain sense a pragmatic question to be put on the table in an adaptive sense. So what we see there is that knowledge and policy making is much more interactive now today. And we are going beyond the sort of simple questions, if I phrase it like that, which have been put in general terms, I think, which are also somehow, you know, underlining the kind of debates we're having here. Is it about migration? Is it about state building processes? Is it about different forms of land use? Is it about energy transition? What is it? You know? And I think we have to move away from that discussion in generic terms, and then really focus on what's happening on a systemic level, the global level. We need global climate science. We need it because it is delivering us these great big targets for the future. But at the same time, post-Paris, we know that, you know, it's not enough. we have to link that to regional action. But then we also have to link these regional actions back to the global goal. I think that's the way forward.
So what are the changes, do you think, in institution and maybe in mindset, which are required in order to make that happen? I mean, part of what you're talking about could be seen in a big sense as learning by doing.
Yeah.
Right? So you have an analysis, you have an idea, you start to unfold an action, you learn, you tweak, you change it as you go along. But what are the institutional and mindset changes which you need for that to work?
There are different set of things happening. And lucky for us, it's not just something which is happening on the knowledge side, but it's also happening on the governance side.
Right.
And it's happening also in companies, because also companies have to reposition themselves. What I find striking was in Paris, what made Paris succeed instead of Copenhagen? That's the role of the cities, and the companies, and the NGOs. Taking it away from the table of just the nation states, but making a much broader sort of social agenda. And I think that's in a certain sense what's happening here, and you see it mirrored on the knowledge side. So on the knowledge side, of course, you see, there's still scientific knowledge. There's still sound, systemic, scientific knowledge, and we need that, because otherwise we don't know where to go to. But on the other hand, there are all kinds of knowledge intermediaries now coming into being, which are able to, in a certain sense, translate that systemic knowledge to regional actions, and also back again then to systemic knowledge development. So what you see is, on the one hand, and on the knowledge side, you see much more differentiation. And there's much more interaction and differentiation between the knowledge side on the one hand and the action side on the other. So action-based knowledge in a much more adaptive and interactive mode.
Right. I'm going to come to Christian in a moment, but I want to tell you all in the audience that given the way the time is ticking, I'm changing my plan. And instead of having 2 laps around the panel before we go to questions, it's going to be 1 lap. That means when I've finished asking a couple of questions to Christian and he's finished dispensing his wisdom in response to them, and it will be wise, I know, then I will be asking you to put up your hands and raise questions. And of course, if you don't, then I've got so many questions to ask myself, and I will fling them back towards the earlier panelists. But Christian, I wanted to start with you, if it's okay, with the sort of the potentially toxic issue, which is migration. I was really interested by what Sherry was saying, and I think that there is a link that goes through from there through what Hans was saying about this, the role of getting local institutions, local participants taking part in handling some of the big issues, to thinking then about how is it possible in different cities and towns in Europe to be handling the migration issue, which hit so hard in a political sense in 2015. I mean, as many people have pointed out, the numbers, they were larger than they had been for a long time, but they were not in percentage terms proportionate to Europe's population, overwhelming in the way that refugee figures from Syria are overwhelming in the Turkish border areas in Lebanon and Jordan. But politically, it was a great big hit. Now, are there aspects in what we've been hearing already where you can see a way forward for a better discourse, a better discussion, and indeed better policy making on migration?
Well, thank you. And let me start by saying on behalf of the Dutch government how happy we are that you're all here in The Hague at this conference. We started a few years ago, and Alexander was already mentioned, one of the big people who really spurred us as a government to organize this. And this is really something, well, across different departments. My ministers would have both have loved to be here. They are abroad, so unfortunately they couldn't be here today. But this is really a topic close to their heart. Well, then back to your question. Well, in general terms, the question of, let's say, migration, security, climate change, I mean, has been also a history in the Dutch politics. I mean, we have a long history of looking to, let's say, root causes of conflict. As I just explained to Sherry, we have a long history. I sit every week with the Chief of Staff of Defense. I sit with my political colleagues on security issues. because we are convinced it's a good thing to look at, let's say, prevention agenda and to look at root causes for conflict, root causes for migration, root causes for climate change. And well, the good news also is that this is explicitly mentioned in our coalition agreement. We have a new government, for those of you who come from abroad only 2 months ago. And we're very happy that this is so close in their political agenda. So then, coming from the agenda to something concrete, and migration is then, of course, also in the Netherlands, very high on the agenda, although I completely agree in numbers. I think for Europe this was a relatively, the influx was relatively, well, modest if you compare it what other countries had to deal with. I was in, let me start maybe by saying I was in Abidjan 2 weeks ago at the EU-Africa summit. And there was a discussion where I think many European leaders wanted to also, I mean, the official agenda was on youth, but of course there was many people who wanted to talk about migration because it was so high on the political agenda. And there was attention for, let's say, root causes for migration, because it was a lot about investing and about economic opportunities. But we saw that, well, really discussing migration is still very sensitive, especially in relation between, I think, many Western countries. And so I think it's up to us to really make it concrete and operationalize. And I think that can be on different levels. On the macro level in the UN, we're dealing with a comprehensive framework on migration these days, negotiating. We will become part of the Security Council as of the 1st of January. Well, this is a topic, the relation between climate, migration, and security is an important issue for us. But also in countries, we organize some workshops with colleagues in our embassies in Bamako, in Amman, to see, well, what does it actually mean? I mean, we talk about it, we try to get more evidence, and we need the evidence because it's still debated and it's not clear. I just read in preparation of this the paper of Louise on climate, migration, security, and it says the relationship is academically contested. I mean, we have to deal with that. But still, at the same time, it says, well, there is some no-regret policy options. Yeah. And I think it's up to us, policymakers, to really make it concrete and work on these root causes.
And you're the DG on international cooperation, development cooperation. So how does development cooperation fit into that? Or how does that fit into development cooperation?
Well, as said, I think we have a long history of fighting root causes for migration, for stability, for instability, for conflict. So what we do in our work and development is really focus on those areas which deal with these root causes. And as the Netherlands, we always said we can't do anything on development. We focus on those areas where we think we have a value added. So the water sector is, of course, a clear sector. Agriculture is a clear sector. We are the second agro exporter in the world where we have something to add. So especially in those two sectors, we have big programs together with the colleagues from infrastructure and water, together with the colleagues from the economy and climate. I'm happy they're also here. We focus really on, let's say, climate, smart agriculture in our programming. We work on water adaptation. We work on dikes, and we use our knowledge, what we have, let's say, gained over the centuries in the Netherlands, how we can use that for Bangladesh, or how we can use that for Vietnam, or working in deltas. And, well, we try to do this as adaptive as possible, as Ant was saying. And, well, how concretely? I mean, we are now in the process of policy making. We will come up with different policy notes in a few months from the government. And, well, this conference, therefore, is a very good for that.
So, the questions from you all. I've given you forewarning, and you're allowed, please, now you're welcome, you're encouraged to come with questions. If you don't, then my question straight away to Minister Janabi, please, Hassan, is to ask you, do you feel at this point, from your perspective in government, that for Iraq these issues are moving forwards in terms of water security for the population and the possibility of that being part of building a peaceful future? do you feel it's standing still, that it's still locked? Or do you feel that there is a danger of regression and slipping back? How do you regard those kinds of issues? Is Iraq at a turning point, I guess, is the question which I'm trying to ask you.
I think it is. I think it is. But we just finished the war with the ISIS, with Daesh. So, and we finished the war with nearly empty budget. We don't have financial resources available to us. So, for example, just one example, we have hundreds of thousands of people who have been fighting Daesh for the last 3 years. So now these people suddenly probably would find themselves out of the job. Now they go back to their farms, and because of this year water shortage, so there's a social sort of, I wouldn't say upheaval, but there is a conflict even between the governors themselves. There's extraction of water, of the little water that we have. But on top of that, we suffered an earthquake for the first time, a severe earthquake in Iraq. So just to add to the challenges that we are facing. And this earthquake put one of the major dams in our country out of service. So we will be facing summertime that's going to be really very tough, even in terms of providing safe drinking water to the population. Now, how much people are realizing this challenge, I doubt, but I keep talking about it. Certain other circles in the government are taking notes. The World Bank also has took action to this. But I think I would imagine that still there are existential threats to our country that perhaps take priority in terms of security. And right now and perhaps for some time, but if the international community would be quick enough in responding to Iraq needs, I think we can make a difference in terms of return needs. Now the rate of the returns of displaced people in Mosul and other areas occupied by Daesh is accelerating. So providing services to settle down these people, get them their jobs, building their schools and health centers, and provide water and other services is very important. Now, how much is this is linked to a climate change threat? I am not quite sure how to express that, but because of the severity of the problems that we are facing now, and actions need to be taken now. Now, of course, I would love to see short-term actions contributing to a long-term solution. This is a perfect world. But Iraq is not yet a perfect place to do all these imaginative plans. I mean, even in these undeveloped countries, they also face different kind of ideas, of options. But I would imagine that I'm happy about the social awareness of what the lack of water could make. But I'm not very happy because of the lack of resources, financial. My ministry for this 2017, my capital investment budget is zero, compared to $1.7 billion back in 2013.
Right.
And the draft budget for the 2018, our capital investment and for water services, water management, and my ministry also is going to be zero. So we have to deal...
That, in one sense, that's the price you're paying for the war of the last 4 years with Daesh. Yes. Right.
It's not only the last 4. We had a series of wars with our neighbors, with the international community. We put up with the dictator, but now we need to rebuild our countries. But of course, the knowledge is there, the awareness is there, but the ability to transfer this into reality, into implementation, is still facing formidable challenges.
Very sobering analysis. Hans, and then I was going to turn to the audience.
Yes, just sort of a remark on the basis of caution. I mean, of course there is academic skepticism about the direct relationship between climate change and displacement of people, because there is so much in between. And there's so much to be discussed about short-term and long-term, etc., etc. And I think the debate is good. It's good to have that debate. But at the same time, you know, there are displaced people. And of course, it's probably partly an end-of-pipe issue, yes, but there are displaced people. So let's not be caught up in this sort of weird prison-like dilemma. There are these two realities, and we have to face both realities. There is migration taking place because we don't understand the climate change issue at the moment correctly. I don't think the climate change agenda will need migration. It's strong by itself already, and people are moving forward to do something about it. And I think it's much better then to take climate change actions, both in terms of land use, because it's complicated. Yes, it's about energy, it's about land degradation, not just water supply, but also agriculture. It's about demographics. I mean, there's another elephant in the room which we have to discuss, I think. And it's also about urbanization. We know, yeah, 9 billion people, 70% in cities. You know, of these 70%, 15% of the people in cities are living in flood risk areas. Yeah, either because of sea level rise or because of river basins in which they live. Yeah. So also this urbanization process has to be taken on board in a certain sense to prevent displaced people. And if we prevent displaced people, then we also tackle migration. But for the time being, it's also partly a security problem. So let's not get caught up in these scholastic discussions and be much more pragmatic about how we approach these issues. Also from a knowledge perspective, because you know, moving from analysis to action, to me, doesn't mean leaving the analysis out. It's about a different way of linking analysis and action. Yeah, and it's about not waiting for the whole explanation with absolutely everything in place before you figure out that something needs to be done. I saw a hand here. That was the first one I waved to. He's put his hand back up again now. And then there are some over on this side, which we'll come to. The second one I saw was over there and so on. But we'll take a group of questions, so make notes or mental notes. And please, sir. If you could say who you are as well, each of the questioners.
Azam Alwesh, Nation Iraq Organization. Question to Mr. Hassan Janabi. It is true that you don't have budget to do anything to reduce water usage. But I see a continuation of policy of the Iraqi government of paying farmers to produce wheat at twice the price of that same wheat that the Iraqi government can buy from Canada or United States or Australia. Given your lack of budget, wouldn't a small policy change cause a huge change in the social conditions that you mentioned? The fact that we have Sumerian irrigation methods. Simple procedures can help you reduce the demand on water by changing the economics for farmers. Drip irrigation is another thing. Salinity, salinization of water coming in from Syria is a bigger problem to me than the lack of water, lack of coordination with Turkey. Drip irrigation, changing government policy is simple. It is within your hands as Baghdad. You can change the budget from the Ministry of Water Resources of Agriculture and change and cause a great change. Why are we continuing the same methods that have been going on since the 1990s?
Okay, thanks. Great question. We'll park it for a second. There was one here, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I really would like to thank I'm Ibrahim Togola. I'm from Mali, and I'm very honored to be here. And we have been actively working in Mali with the ambassador of the Netherlands in Mali, who was personally active. And I want to thank him and thank the authorities for inviting us here. I have a question, because this is very important in political aspect. We are talking about climate change, we are talking about migration. But for me, these two elements, my question is to all the participants. These are consequences. Climate change is a consequences of our productions, the consumption patterns, the modern lifestyles. Since there are one university person there, today all the universities, we are in the south taking the models of industrializations of the lifestyle of the north. And that means there are very little which is done to really change, like Madame mentioned about the smart decisions. We are going in the same way, and we are studying our children in the same ways as 50 years ago, and at least for our part of the world. And migration is also consequences, and is a lifestyle, urbanizations, and a way of how we are producers of natural resources. And in the north, there's a transformer added value, and it come back to us. One example, there are almost 3 million cotton farmers in my country who have been producing cotton, and my country is transforming only 2% of that cotton. If we will added value, we will have almost 10 million jobs, you know, and so we will not need to move, but we are processing only 2% of it. So that means all these young people don't have job after harvest. They have to move to the cities and move beyond. So these migrations and climate change, I think we need really to address this courageous and very smart decisions. And otherwise, it needs actions and to really make something happen.
Thank you very much, sir. Another really great question, and there's a hand conveniently right there. And if the answers are quick, then we'll be able to take the others of you who had your hands up.
Thank you very much. David Reed, WWF. I've just published a book based on 14 geographies around the world in which we've documented, it's called Water Security in U.S. Foreign Policy, how we've documented how water-driven, that's to say water, extreme weather events, drought, have intersected with other social problems to create disruptions of such magnitude that it is really difficult to talk about the development trajectory in many countries. That begs the question then, is it not necessary to also have a security intervention that accompanies our, quote, normal development pathways? And indeed, if such is the case, what kind of security intervention, be it internal or external, is needed in order to put us back on a development path? I look at the experience of Iraq as an extraordinary example, whether it's Abu Sayyaf, Boko Haram, and others, the challenges are many around the world.
Great. Well, I mean, it's three very good, very wide-ranging questions. One was directly to you, Hassan, and you maybe comment on that and pick up any other point you wish to, and then I'll come to the others. To Sherry first.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Azam, for these questions. Yes, it is true. This government subsidies is still heavily going towards the agriculture sector. Our biggest customer as a Ministry of Water Resources is the Ministry of Agriculture, and they consume 70% of our water, of the water that we are managing, we are storing, we are distributing. And at the same time, because of all these series of wars and bad policies, right now Iraq is importing 70% of its food need. So it is really imbalanced there. Yes, government subsidies, I wish I can do magic to remove them and divert this input subsidies into either the output to increase the production or to forward it to the water infrastructure, technology improvement, improving the water use efficiency. So I will do that without hesitation at all. But what happens also during this period, the last 4 decades up to now, we also have this over-control of water at the origin in the neighboring countries. And now, also because Iraq became hostage of this war and became weak in a way, so Iraq became an open market for all products, including agriculture products. So that we are suffering what we call virtual water. So we import virtual water in terms of all these agriculture production using the very water that used to come to our country. So we lost the water, we lost the means to produce this food, but we also import that food. So the water that used to be available for us, now we have to pay to get it that. And then, you know, this, the longer it lasts, the more difficulties it happens, because there will be interest groups that are interested in continuing the status quo and trying to make the government decisions, to fail the government decisions. But also there is a network of people who are very much mobile in terms of smuggling, like the subsidized product like wheat. Wheat now in Iraq, yes, the government buys from the farmers and higher prices than in the international market. So this also allows some other bad guys to import, to get this outside wheat production and basically market it as internal production. So this is a network that we need to put up with this. Our voices are higher with time. If you put your voice to my voice to the others, we can make these things happen. I think these are probably as enough answer to Azam, and I see him smiling, so he's accepting my answer.
That's always good. Sherry, I think both the question of the smart policies for the longer range issues and also the security and development intervention, you may like to comment on.
Right. Well, thank you. I think these the questions both from our Iraq and Mali colleagues point out the importance of having smart agriculture and smart water policies at both the international and at the local level. I think something that's been underappreciated until fairly recently, and understanding the water, energy, agriculture nexus and how it works in each country. Of course, in the U.S., we have unreasonable subsidies in various sectors as well that are long-standing and hard to get rid of. And there's been excellent work done. David Reed's done excellent work on water and security and foreign policy. The volume he published was terrific. I see my colleague Marcus King, who has also done excellent work on that and on weaponization of water. I think this has all really contributed a lot. I want to come back to sort of where Hans, and tie together what Hans pointed to about being able to integrate different ways of doing planning today in various organizations. Whether it's, military organizations are huge planning organizations, but so are development and foreign development agencies. It has often been top-down. But what's enabling us today to change the way we do this is the remarkable advances. We face all these unprecedented risks with climate, security, and others, but the foresight ability we now have, the tools we now have through big data, analysis, AI, AR techniques are enabling us to do planning and simulation in ways that we never could before. In fact, earlier today, I saw a simulation technique by a Dutch company that takes critical infrastructure and models the flood or terrorist hack risk down at the very local level so that mayors and local decision makers can see what the consequences of their choices are. And it's brilliant. And I think this is going to enable a whole new era of being able to take these, integrate these systemic trends from climate change and water risks and down at the local unit level for more transparency and to enable more people to be able to appreciate what the risks are and then change the decision. Often, the security issues associated with this, in the U.S. dialogue at least, have been about what we would call the wolf closest to the sled. And if the wolf closest to the sled is the cyber or nuclear attack that's going to happen tomorrow, but the climate risk is next year, but you don't know when that next storm is coming, and we've had a big hurricane train that came through and wildfires. So now, at least in U.S. consciousness, the wolf is a little bit closer to the sled than maybe it was a few years ago. But still, there are, I think, are better opportunities, and we can marshal some of these new techniques and abilities that are coming to enable more people to be involved in the planning, decision-making, and change kind of the citizen basis for movement in this area.
Christian, can we pick up on the security and development intervention that David Reed mentioned?
Yes, I think it's an excellent question. Look, if you talk about, let's say, security interventions, my domain is more the soft security intervention, the more preventive. And more, I think we look to our water programs and the things we do to how can they actually contribute to, let's say, to prevent conflicts coming up by, let's say, make sure there is equal distribution of water resources, or making sure that let's say, not only the happy few are protected from water floodings and that kind of measures. On the more, let's say, harsh military interventions, I agree with the analysis of Sherry. I mean, it's coming closer, the wolf is coming closer, but we're not that so far yet. I think also not in our military analysis and observations. But well, let's face it, the day is coming closer that we have to. And well, it's good to be prepared. And
Hans, you indicated just now you wanted to.
Yes, because of course the person, Mr. from Mali, is absolutely right, because it's again, as I was saying, the relationship between systemic knowledge and knowledge on the ground is changing fundamentally, because it's no longer true that systemic knowledge is somewhere up there in the cloud, only captured by academics. No, it's based on open-based data, open data. We're talking about citizen science. And what you see is that this sort of digitalization of information, which is opening up new sources of information, is also changing the debate, because it's happening as we talk. Economic models are shifting. I mean, there's a group of financiers now discussing in Paris the way assets should be valued. And of course, the footprint kind of perspectives are part of that. And so we're also talking about the SDGs. The SDGs are taken on board as a way to account for what companies are doing. So it's not just about economic models, it's also about social models, and it's about ecological models that are now taken on board. So we are changing, I think, our economic concepts. It's not happening yet as we like to have it, but it's shifting.
But it's beginning.
And I think these open data systems, public data, I think there is a responsibility there also for scientists and other sort of information organizations to open up these data, for people to have them. Modeling is not something which is monopolized by academics. Modeling is something which will be happening by all kinds of citizen groups, and they will come with their alternative models. So I think that's a very fruitful future to look at, and I think it's also part of a new way of looking at how policies are made today.
Yeah, which is necessary because, as we keep on saying, the future is going to be different from the past. So the way in which we are responding to that future as it comes closer, as we become part of it, it's essential that changes. There were a couple of hands up earlier on, and at least one is here, the gentleman there. Keep on coming forward and stop now, and it's the one on your left hand. And there could be one other which was down this side, that hand. That's what it'll have to be. You've got about a minute each to ask your questions, and then there's a minute each for the four panelists to respond. So, terse.
Yes, thank you. Benjamin Tito from Gender Concerns International. First of all, thank you for a very important conference and a very interesting plenary session. I'm interested in hearing the views of the panel on the intersection of gender and climate security, and also the specific vulnerabilities of women in the face of environmental disaster. As a representative of a gender organization, we would, of course, have liked to see more of an inclusion of a gender perspective, both in this conference and in the declaration. So, yeah, my question is basically, what is your views on that?
A challenge to the four of you after the next question, which is the gentleman here. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Diba Weiss. I come from Jordan, but work for ICARDA, International Center for Agricultural Research in Dry Areas. And I'd like to thank the panel and the moderator for very, very good discussion on climate change and security. And I think the skepticism on the relationship between climate change and migration and other things will continue to be forever. We currently have skepticism on whether we have climate change in some places. And the responses to that don't have to wait until we have consensus on this relationship between climate change. And as Hans indicated, immigration is happening, and we know it. And we know the root causes of migration to Europe, for example, from Africa. It's poverty. We know that the major factor is poverty, and yet the response to poverty in Africa is still shy, and we know that it is a major root cause of migration. We see more actions actually in nonsense responses, like building walls. I mean,
I don't want to be rude, sir, but could you put the question so that...
Yeah. My question is how we could convince policymakers to take the action, not waiting for consensus on this relationship between climate change and security.
Each of you now will get a minute or so to answer. You all just saw the sign go up at the back, which says we don't have much time. And I think that one of the background thoughts that goes along with those questions is that talking about, or sometimes calling our topic, climate change and security, is in itself misleading, because there are so many different factors involved, both in what lead to climate change, also what defines what the impact of a changing climate will be on different communities and societies in different places, also what the responses are, and then when we move on to the security side as well. There's never been a conflict caused by a single factor. There's many different kinds of insecurity. And so we're talking about a much more complex arena or array of things than just climate change here and security there. And I think that both of those questions invite you to come up with about 65 seconds each of commentary upon that. And why don't we just move along the line, starting with Hans and come on down.
Very briefly, two observations here. One is, I think, the regional component. I think we should get away from the general discussion and really focus on regions and have clear ideas of what's happening in these regions in terms of the interaction between climate change, land use, urbanization, water supply, state building processes, governance issues, etc., etc. So perhaps that's one way to tackle it. Just let's get clear about what the regions are about. And then the gender issue, I think that's not just in principle, it's absolutely clear, important issue. As I said before, the elephant in the room is demographics. Yeah? And that's related to the position of women. And I think the position of women is crucial to the debate. So let's indeed incorporate that into debate, also in the way in which urbanization processes are organized, the way labor markets are organized, social securities are organized, etc., etc. So yes, the gender issue should also be on the table.
Hassan.
Yeah, thank you very much. Talking about migration, I mean, it's not all bad. Migration is also sometimes a desire for people to go and live somewhere. I myself migrated from 1979 until 2003, until the change of the regime took place. Then I went back. So migration as such is good. We shouldn't be against migration. Now, the causes for these migrations we need to talk about. Like, for example, in Iraq, when we migrated, there's hundreds of thousands of people like me who left Iraq just because of political reasons, because of persecution and dictatorship. Iraq used to be a very rich country. Now is not the case, of course, after 40 years of war. So we should not be scared of migrants. We should open up our borders. In our case, of course, now migration in Iraq does not, now there's a backward. People who migrated before are thinking or going back to the country, and they are well educated. They could contribute better, just like me, for example. I think I never thought to be a minister after 25 years of absence. And outside our country. So migration as such, even the Syrian migration is not because of poverty, it's also political reasons, and things have got into completely different dynamics that caused millions of Syrians to leave their own country. Nothing better than your own country, I tell you that. Even when you migrated, you hold that in your heart. So everything has its root. So let us not just put everything under one banner and then we sort of, against migration or things like that. Yes, of course, poverty is an issue, climate change is a bigger issue, etc. But there are also a human desire to go and discover and live and get educated. Thank you.
Thank you. Sherry.
Thank you for the question on gender inclusion. Last year in Zambia, I visited a village that had recently gotten solar-powered water pumps. And this enabled the community, organized and led primarily by women who do the local farming and also haul the water, then to have more sustainable and local farms, be able to manage it themselves, enabling their children not to have to spend their days hauling water, but be able to go to school and get the education that most of the mothers didn't have, so that they would have more diverse opportunities in the future. Also presents, reduces the risks that girls and women have faced for many years in having to seek water far away and being subject to rape and other problems. So I think these, I think this inclusion, gender inclusion is very important part of this discussion. I think there are a lot of local solutions, like I just described, that can help address and improve circumstances. We need to understand where populations and people are still very much at risk, and need to address that. I think it's an important part of this agenda. And I very much align myself with the other comments here. I think that we have, while we're becoming much more aware and much more evidence of the systemic risks of climate change, we also at the same time have these unprecedented opportunities to kind of restructure our global energy systems and also to restructure how we are thinking about and using water in a much more sustainable way at both as a global security context, integrating it further into our foreign and security policies, but also at very local levels where we're developing smart agricultural policies and working cross borders and addressing the migration issue where it really matters.
Thanks a lot, Sherry. And Christian, final word.
Yeah, maybe to start, I mean, I was the one who was citing your analysis and the phrase that the relation between migration and climate change and security is contested. But the good thing of the paper is that it actually said, well, there are so many no-regret options to work on, even if this is still debated. And one, of course, is fighting poverty, because that's the one of the root causes of all these migration and of instability. And we also know that, because for us, climate change, I think the World Bank did some research on this, that so many people, hundreds of million people, will fall back into poverty just because of climate change. I think the same, unfortunately, is often true for the position of women, who are often most hardly hit by climate change and poverty. I mean, that's no news. But we also, in our policy, we try not just to look at women as victims, but really also as agents of change, both to have their rights, their reproductive rights, their sexual rights. And I think there's a clear challenge. Also, let's say, if you look to the demographics, as Hans was saying, but also if you look to, for instance, access to energy, where we can make big steps forward. Finally, we are, as I said, will be in the Security Council. These issues on women's rights and the relation with conflict, the issues of climate change, of water scarcity, is really something we will bring up to the agenda. Sweden is in the Security Council. I mean, it's very close to their agenda. So both of us, I can assure you, will bring these issues to that table.
Right, great. Well, thank you so much, the four of you. Thank you for your questions and your attention. We need a practical housekeeping comment or two. But before we do the practicalities and go to lunch, can we please thank the four panelists for a really good kickoff to the conference. Over to Louise.
Yeah, this is just to let you know that lunch will be served, I think, and outside and in the restaurant place of the Marriott Hotel. We have a long lunch of 2 hours, but during the lunch we have so-called special sessions from 1:45 till 1:45. And these are sessions for which you have not had to subscribe, but you can just go there. And in one of them, the UN Security Council, there is also some food there in the room. And there is 3 sessions. One is on the climate fragility risk assessments on the Lake Chad region. One is on Trump, COP21 and climate security. I think that will be in this room. And one is on the UN Security Council. Well, you can see the signage outside. The volunteers, the people at the reception can guide you to the right venue. So the lunch is 2 hours, but in the lunch we have a 1 hour slot reserved for the special sessions, and I hope that you will join us at these special sessions. Thank you.